Welcome to Partnering with Youth and Families, Training One, Families and Caregivers as Partners. So I am Caradina Sale, and I am joined by Melanie Funches, who is a wonderful collaborator of ours here at CTAC. Melanie has been collaborating with us for many years, and we're really grateful to have her and her expertise join us in many ways. I'm just going to introduce myself, pass it on to Melanie, and then we're going to get started. So I'm Kara. I'm a social worker. I work at the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research, and I help to lead our Community Technical Assistance Center of New York State. So for the past many years, I've been developing trainings and educational experiences for providers in the field. I love this work. I think it's really important. I also have been a social worker for about 26 years. I okay, we're talking about some volume happening. Okay, good. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. I started my work in a residential treatment center in 1997, and I learned many hard lessons in that work and went back to graduate school. And some of the lessons that I learned in that work were around how important self-care is. I learned about systemic racism and how terrible it is. And I also learned about trauma. And obviously, there is an overlap there as well, right? I have worked in many different settings, and throughout my career, I have learned so much from families. I have learned so much from caregivers, and I've learned so much. Actually, I really was trained by family peer advocates, and so did a lot of work in conducting groups with family peer advocates. And so I try to engage with family peer advocates often and frequently in all the work that we do. And so I wanted to pass it on to Melanie to introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Melanie Funches. I live in Rochester, New York, but I'm originally from the Bronx, Boogie Down, born and bred. I am the Director of Mental Health and Wellness at Common Ground Health, which is a health planning organization serving the 9-county Finger Lakes region. But more so than that, I am a family member. I am what I call a 3-generation peer. I'm the child of, I'm a peer myself, and I am the parent of children who refer to themselves as neurospicy. And so they have different types of challenges. They're now all incredible adults, and I am a family peer advocate. I've been in this work for oh my God, almost 30 years. I'm approaching 30 years. I started this work before I had children of my own, helping other parents navigate systems that I felt were inherently unfair. And then when I had my own children, I saw just how broken things were. And I said, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to accept the things I cannot change. I'm going to change the things I cannot accept. And it started me on this road to family advocacy. And I've moved in the last maybe 10 years, 12 years to really hone my focus in culturally responsive practice. I've always worked in that area, but that has been like the central focus of my work for maybe the last 12, 15 years, let's say. And what I found is when we create a precision of fit between what is needed and what is given, we get good outcomes. And that's just what that is. And I'm just happy to be here and happy to be able to be part of this learning community.
Thank you, Melanie. So we went over this. The slides will be posted within a few days. Again, please, for those of you joining new, just please submit any of your questions in the chat. We're going to be using our chat quite a bit. Our agenda, I mentioned this earlier, but just as a reminder, we're talking about why partnering with families is important. We're going to discuss important frameworks throughout our 3 trainings. We're going to talk about meeting families where they are, looking at what we're doing in all the 3 trainings, and then we're going to be meeting Randall and Mrs. Simmons, okay? Miss Simmons is Randall's mom. So I just want to welcome you all and have you join me in a moment of understanding why we're here. We are here because family engagement really underpins effective treatment and contributes to the well-being of youth families and also us as service providers. We know that a child's well-being, a child's mental health is so connected to their caregivers and their family's well-being, as well as the quality of the relationship. It's what we call bi-directional relationship. And so forgot to mention I have 2 kids of my own. I was gonna get into that in a minute, but I'm my kids and we have a bi-directional relationship. If they're not doing well, I'm struggling. If I'm struggling, they're not doing well, right? And family members possess extensive knowledge about their kids, their young people, the way their families function, their strengths, their needs, their cultural values, their physical and social environments, all of which are essential for understanding for effective treatment. We know that when caregivers are engaged in mental health treatment, their young person's symptoms and their functioning consistently improve. Engaged caregivers are better able to cope with challenges and report higher satisfaction with services received. So that's why we're here. Chat in if you disagree. Do you disagree with any of this? Because if you do, we'd love to talk to you. Okay, I don't see any chats. But what do you think? Why do you think it's important to partner with caregivers and families? So chat in there. Why do you think it's important? Why is it important? Better outcomes for both, getting everyone's buy-in. Yes, caregivers and families spend the greatest amount of time with each other. Yep, to support their needs, better outcomes. They see things we might not, learn from each other. Families are experts. Everyone is connected. Yes, they're the experts on
Sarah,
the.
are we able to
Hi,
speak about about the question
please,
opposed to just putting it in the chat?
please,
For me,
Jacqueline.
it's so that the families could be all on one accord because they might be receiving services from another organization. And oftentimes a lot of the families have one organization asking some things of them and the next organization doing that as well. So if everyone can come together to work on a service plan as the family as a whole and let the families be the driving force. It should
Absolutely.
be family driven is what they're requesting, not more so what the providers are asking. But that me being in this field for like 23 years, I see that that has been a challenge and it's still an ongoing challenge with the different programs, not coming together to just work with the families as a whole. So that's what I want to say.
Absolutely. Jacqueline, I feel you. We used to talk about, everyone got a P, a plan, an ISP, an IEP, and everybody trying to pee on me, right?
Mhm.
As a parent. And so and that was a running joke among parents. Like, and we wanted to do that, like when systems of care came in and we talked about one child, one family, one plan. Because we have set, you'll have 50, 11 providers trying to each, meet their thing. And everyone's saying, well, why aren't you doing this? Because I was in a meeting with this provider, so we can all come together and we can partner with the family driving. When we back in the olden days, we talked about and when we were talking about family driven care, there was a graphic that had the parent steering the car and the young person held the map back before GPS when we had maps, right? And that is that's optimal. That is what we strive for. That is why I do what I do to help us get there. Because when we get there, everybody gets what they need. And thank you for that, Jacqueline.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to unmute? Wonderful chats coming in. Anybody else want to unmute and share? Especially when working with youth, you get the full circle look at their child and their background. They know better than anyone what is going on and needed. Fantastic. And Jacqueline agreed. I mean, the partnership is around working and partnering with families and caregivers in the driver's seat and partnership all around, right? And in whatever way they're participating in services and whatever is really needed. And that partnership is equally important. I agree.
And and when we look at why it's important to partner with family care, we've said all these things, right? But something I want us to look at is our partnership needs to be intentional and deliberate. People will say, well, we'll build partnership while we're doing the work. No, building relationship, building rapport, building relationship, building a partnership needs to be its own work product, right? It needs to be a very intentional and deliberate part of planning, because parents, we don't know what parents are walking in with and what happened in the 17 meetings that happened before they met you. So we need to really be, transparent and good and intentional and deliberate about saying we want to make this partnership and do the things, because we say, well, parents will drop out. Yes, parents drop out, but we also show up. And like, what's the saying, slow quitting? We will show up physically and won't be invested emotionally, and that doesn't help anyone. And we want to be engaged. Like someone else said, we want to have buy-in. We as parents want these processes to work. We want our families to have, good outcomes and high levels of functioning. This means as much to us as it does to you. And we just need to make sure that everybody is seen in their full humanity.
Thank you, Melanie. So we want to ground us why we're here, and want to talk a little bit about our community of practice. That's what we're calling these 3 trainings, a community of practice. There are 3 different trainings over the next few weeks. So thank you for joining us. Your participation is incredibly important as we navigate, understand, learn, and apply the best practices of family engagement over the next few weeks. So why are we all here? So I wanted to start by sharing, this is our team that we've developed these trainings. So Melanie and myself, Maria Fuentes, who's also a family peer advocate, Lydia Franco, who runs our children's center, Dr. Jim Rodriguez, who is what we call our clinical director here at CTAC, and Amy Paroli, who also is a family peer advocate. So we've all been working together to develop these trainings for a number of months, along with Melanie. And so in the next training, you'll hear from Maria and Lydia. And then in the third training, you'll hear from Jim and Amy. So really looking forward to all this with you. So I'm just orienting you around your time with us over the next several weeks. Okay. But what brought you to this training? I would love to hear that. And I would love to just start by sharing. I think Melanie and I are going to share a little bit about what brought us here, and how important this work is. And so I am here because I'm a social worker, as I mentioned, and I help to lead our CTAC efforts. I also have I have 2 boys, 2 sons, and my older son, who's in college now, struggled with mental health issues. And so I understand how necessary it is, as so many of you do, to partner with providers, right? And so we had therapists, we had psychiatrists, so many different people that we were working with. And the second I felt like you're not listening to me, do you care about my family? The second I felt that, I was off to a different provider. So I understand families' experiences, as well as family peer advocates who've trained me over the years to say, don't talk about us without us. And so that became a mantra of mine when we were creating trainings, when I'm delivering services. I'm not going to talk about caregivers without them. And so I learned over the years how the transparency and that collaboration. I mean, I think we throw that word around a little bit, but it's so imperative. But Melanie, what brought you here?
I'm here because, as a family member, I have 4 children. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. They are now 30, 28, 26, and 24. But when they were younger, we experienced a full gamut of the system. Our kids had IEPs. I've experienced CPEP. I've experienced inpatient. I've experienced partial. We've experienced attempts. And what we found, we knew what made the difference is good partnership. Right. And now that my kids are adults and their friends are having children and their friends' children are going to school, I'm seeing, feels like we are losing ground on some of the things that we had worked so hard to get when my kids were young. That people have, like, I don't know whether we just stopped tending the store or what have you, but I feel that it's time to go back and really reinforce some of the things that we were teaching before about how do you partner with families? How do you not blame and shame? How do you create effective partnerships that foster good outcomes? How do you get buy-in? And so I'm here to, I can't, I'm not one to complain about a thing and not do something about it. So I'm here to, put my shoulder to the wheel, like with the rest of us, to really, you know, to share my experience and help us all grow.
Thank you. So I see some amazing chats coming in to help the struggling families I see. I want to expand my knowledge of how to engage families, all members in the process of meeting their goals, to learn more about families, to engage one another without being worried about feedback. I work in a school setting to helping teachers understand the benefits of partnering with families and open to personal growth. Want to learn how to strengthen relationships with caregivers to better assist with families in my county. Thank you. Anybody want to unmute and share with us? Nicole says, I work in community health. I'm always looking for new ways to work with staff and community and families. Want to get some help with engaging families. My son struggles with mental health as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing.
This is awesome.
Yeah. Want to help
Working with grandparents. As a grandparent, you also deal with your grandchildren. Just because they are not grandchildren doesn't mean that you're still part of the family. You have to deal with part of their problems as a grandparent. So you're the second one in command with that problem. That's why I'm here.
Thank you, Renata. Wonderful. I love that
And
you're
I want
bringing.
to honor you as a grandparent, for standing in the gap. Thank you so much.
Yes. I love that you're bringing up grandparents, because we are going to talk about the definition of family as well in our time today. Jenna, hi.
Hi. I am here just because I work with Liberty Resources in Syracuse, New York. So I'm a school-based mental health therapist. And I work with Syracuse, the Syracuse City School District. And I'm here because I've been here this is my 4th school year. Historically, there's pretty low engagement levels with our families.
Mm.
I'm not a district employee, so like with my families on my caseload, there's pretty low engagement levels. So I'm just here to learn how to increase those engagement levels in different ways.
Great. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Yes. Anybody else? All right. What do we know about family engagement and family partnership and mental health services? So we've talked a little bit about this, but this is kind of bird's eye view, right? Around what we know is facts, really. Caregivers with high need children who do not receive validation for their experiences or feel blamed. Do we know caregivers that feel blamed and shamed? And we know they're higher risk for dropout, higher risk for not coming back for mental health services when they really want it and need it, right? There needs to be an understanding of the history and the effects of the power dynamics on families, right? So we can't ignore that there are power dynamics here. Power dynamics do not mean we don't partner, right? So I used to run a lot of groups. I helped develop a treatment for kids, young people who were challenged with conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. And in that process, I would say to the families, I know this curricula. I'm the expert on this curricula, but I'm not the expert on your family. You are, right? And so that is one way to attend to the power dynamics. We can't dismiss this need of remembering that, and also understanding the history and effects on our families, as well as understanding that cultural and racial differences between providers and families can lead to misunderstanding and can also lead to dropout, right? So we know this about engagement in mental health services. And that's the other reason why we're here. I want to move on to talk about important frameworks throughout this training. So today's training, but training 2 and training 3, and these are underpinning our trainings. And I want to start by looking at family-driven care, trauma-informed care, and culture-responsive care, okay? But let's start here. How do you define family? How do you define family? So I was always told about nuclear family, right? But I came from a family that I was raised by a single mom. And I was always like, well, I don't know what this nuclear family thing is. That's not me, right? I have a lot of people in my life that have chosen family.
And for me, I define family as the people who love me and the people whom I love.
Mm,
And so, like, I know that it's very common in my family that you may have an aunt that you've called Auntie so and so forever, but if they're going to give you Powerball money to describe how that person is related to you, you'd have to leave the money on the table because you don't that Auntie Beth has been around since 1902 and she's always just been Auntie Beth. You don't know how she got there, you don't know what it is, but she's Auntie Beth, right? And so, the key is like different families, the set of people who call themselves a family get to define what their family is.
yes.
You can't tell me, like I had let's say I had a colleague named Lenora Reed Rose. Lenora went from being a colleague to being a friend to being my Jamaican auntie. You could not tell me. My children referred to her as Auntie Lenora. Referred to her as Aunt. They would always talk about Auntie Lenora. Did she bring us Patty? Did Auntie Lenora where's Auntie Lenora? Auntie Lenora works where there's a bunnies. And people legitimately thought that Lenora and I were related, but we were family. We were not related, but we were family. And so, we get to define what family is.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what everybody's saying in the chat. Anybody want to unmute and share? Sarah saying family is synonymous with community to me. People who show up for you regardless of blood relation.
That's right.
Family
Yeah,
is
I would agree with that. Sorry, I just popped in Stephanie
Go
from
ahead.
Children's Home, but I'm lucky in that I have two parents I adore very much, but I have a lot of friends who don't speak to their families anymore or lost family. So it's really it's become about found family as well.
Yeah. Thank you. People who, Laura saying people who care, love, support each other daily. Unconditional love and support, Jonathan saying. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, somebody chatting? Okay. So we just wanted to take a minute here to define family because so much of what we're talking about in our trainings is family partnership, right? And so it's important to think about how do we define family, and people create their own definitions around family. Family-driven care.
And so when we're talking about family-driven care, right? Families are the primary decision makers. And people, I remember I've been around long enough to remember when we came up with this definition, right? And everybody's like, well, it's not just the families. I'm like, no, we're not saying that. We're saying that the families are the primary, not the only, but primary decision makers for the needs, and the needs of their family, and to make choices around not just their families, but to have voice around the families of their neighborhoods, their state, their nation, their territories, because they're the experts, right? And families have, family driven care is about identifying what are the rights and responsibilities and the needs of families around their children's mental health and wellness. They are in the driver's seat. We do not make decisions without our families. We do not speak for our families. We speak with our families. We are in family driven care. A lot of times as providers, we are trained to be the knowers. You're going to hear a lot in this training about who's a knower. And we are trained that we are the knowers. And, people come to us for answers. So I get why we're known to be the knowers, but families are the biggest knowers, right? And so they get to drive the care, and they speak their truth, however it comes out. The authentic way it comes out, it is what it is, right? And we make sure that they have information in ways that they can use it. I can't tell you how many times I told people I used to act as the UN in rooms where everyone spoke English, because people, as a thing of power, providers would often speak in jargon. And so we had to institute things like no acronym zones and things to make sure that everyone understood. And they were like, well, we're doing this for the parents. I said, no, but you're also doing it for each other. And, because I remember I was in a meeting and we had school people and mental health people both talking about FBA. Right. And there's like, and I'm watching this go back and forth like tennis. It's like the US Open. Duke, 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 Duke. Right. And finally, after about 5 minutes, everybody's saying yes, yes, yes. And the parent and I both know that they're saying different things. I said, are you both talking about the same thing? Say, yes, we're talking about the same thing. And one was a functional behavioral, and education was a functional behavioral assessment, a form, an assessment. In mental health, it was it was a functional behavioral approach. It was a way of doing care. Two totally different things, but had the same acronym. And so we use this as an example to say, if, you both assume that you both knew what each other was talking about, how do you do that? And how are parents? So when we're doing family-driven care, we make sure that everybody understands. Because when we're all on the same page, we can all get to where we're going easier and quicker. And I have a question. Has anyone ever been in a situation like this, where people think they're all speaking the same language and they're speaking different languages? Am I the only one who's ever experienced this?
No, you're not the only
Yeah.
one. It's like when you are, for example, like me in the medical field all this time, you hear all those abbreviations, but that does not mean that it is the same outside of the medical field. So when you
Absolutely.
then come together with all different kinds of ages as well. Now you're sitting together. One is a medical one, the other one is a parent or a grandparent, and then you maybe have the child. None of them would ever understand what each age group is talking about unless you speak it out and you keep it at the lowest level that is present in that room, meaning at the level of the child, which does not normally use abbreviations unless it's taught in school. And that
Absolutely.
is where it has to be. It has to be at the lowest level so everybody understands.
And it's not, and what we talk about, like when I talk about, I say we keep it basic. Keep the main thing, and keep it basic. We do not need, we don't need 7 words when 3 will do. And so in looking at family-driven care, how do we make sure that, we're looking at, make sure we have culturally and linguistically competent supports and services. We're partnering, in all the things, and make sure that it's in a way that everybody at the table understands. Because we keep going back to this as if parents are not, because the people a lot of times will frame it, well, we got to break it down for the parent. Like the parent is not as smart. But it's the fact that we all have our own language. We all have our own jargon. And by speaking plainly, we can all communicate together. It's not about who's smarter than whom. It's about making sure that we can communicate across all the different systems with all of our different language.
Thank you. And then I want, on that note, a little bit, just thinking about the shift from what is provider driven to what is family driven, right? That's what this little grid is sharing here. So we have up here the source of expertise. So under provider driven, it's professionals and agencies, but under family driven, the source of expertise is the youth, family, and their networks. For relationships, under provider driven, it's child and family viewed as dependent client expected to carry out instructions, right? So here's what you're supposed to do this. Under the family driven and youth guided indicator or framework, We think about partners, collaborators, and decision-making and service provision and accountability. And so that's what this grid shows us, is those differences, those big differences between provider-driven and family-driven and youth-driven, all the way down to outcomes. So even outcomes, provider-driven outcomes is based on agency, function, and symptom. And then family-driven is based on quality of life and desires of child and family and youth, right? So I
You
encourage-
know,
Mhm.
and I just want to share something really quickly, Kara. Like when we look at outcomes, right? I ran a family support program, and I remember we were in a meeting and the parent was ecstatic because the provider was thinking that they just did not do well by this family. And the family said, "Are you freaking kidding me? We've had dinner together every night this week." And what had happened was, because of the manifestation of the child's challenges, they were not able to sit through dinner. It was one of the things. And it was this, for this particular family, this was a thing. And they had learned these different skills and done these different things. And they had had dinner together as a family every night for that week. And the mother was like, "This thing actually works."
Mhm.
Now, by all the little scales that the provider had, there wasn't real movement from what they could see, but this family saw a change in their quality of life. Was that a success? Absolutely. But it was but we've got to change how we define success to what did the family define as success.
Beautiful. And are we deficit oriented? Are we thinking about pathology? Or are we strengths based? Are we resilience focused? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. And then these are the guiding principles of family driven care. This is
So,
Federation for Families of Children's Mental Health, just so everyone knows. Were you going to say something?
and yes. And so when we're looking at the guiding principles, like we talked about the definition that the families are primary decision makers, but this is because we believe this is what we do. Families define themselves, they define their culture. They require culturally responsive services and supports around all the things, right? For me, we are a very African house, right? Blackness, I tell people my blackness is my superpower. It's kept me safe and sane, through the hardest of times. And I've passed that down to my children. So when my children talked about Kwanzaa, or my children talked about, Mom, is this Kushi Jakalia, when we talked about family driven care? I said, yes, we define ourselves, we name ourselves. I wanted my providers to at least understand when they use these terms, that these terms were a thing. We've got, family have access to information and training. We need to make sure that families have all the tools. We are not the sage on the stage. We are the guide on the side. So our job is to make sure the parents have all the tools to be the owners of the tools of their own healing, right? And to be their guide on the side through this journey to help them, because we as paid people will not be in their lives always, and they get to say what their priorities are. Like for that family, the priority, for the schools, the priority was for the kid to have 95% attendance. For the system, it was for the child to, do X, Y, and Z. For that family that I talked about earlier, it was for them to be able to sit down and have dinner together. And once they got there, the other things began to fall in place. Families share power to make decisions, and they also share the responsibility for the outcomes of those decisions. And families are part of evaluating what worked and what didn't work, and that's why we have independent organizations. That's why the National Federation exists. That's why all the different states, like here in New York State, we have Families Together in New York State, and we have different different affiliates around the state. This is why we exist, so that we have a place for our voice collectively as well as individually.
Yes.
And we need to check in on these things regularly, because sometimes we think we're doing it and we're not. Because how many times have we thought we had a thing going and we got real comfortable and we started straying off the mark?
Yeah. Thank you. Trauma-informed care is our other framework that underpins all of our trainings. I think everybody's heard of trauma-informed care, but please let us know if you haven't. But the principles are incredibly important in terms of providing trauma-informed care. Ours are that in trauma-informed organizations and trauma-informed practices, which is what we're really going to be talking about throughout our trainings, that you realize that the trauma is pretty prevalent, right? That almost all of us have some experience or relationship to trauma. That we recognize how trauma affects all individuals involved with the programs and the practices that we're participating in with families, and that we respond by putting the knowledge about trauma into practice. So really, we at CTAC and in our work, we really think about trauma responsive care now as the application of trauma-informed care in all that we do. And then we always, always, always resist re-traumatization of clients as well as staff, right? So we think about that role of self-care, and we think about the role of do no harm. And so we also want to think about traditional views versus trauma-informed views, right? And I'm sure many of you have experiences with this as well, but this is, how we may think about people's behaviors and choices that they make. And in a traditional view, for example, we may think, oh, well, if someone's choosing that behavior and needs to have some consequences, that's a bad behavior, right? That's a traditional view. But a trauma-informed view is people really want to do well, but they may need support. They may need support in building skills or help unlearning unhelpful behavior patterns, right? That's a trauma-informed view. We may think about being authoritarian in a traditional view, whereas a trauma-informed view is really about collaboration. We may be thinking about that the person just isn't coping well, right? But in a trauma-informed view, we're thinking, oh, every kind of behavior is a way of communicating something and serves a function, right? And so I just ask you to think about really the utilization of trauma-informed view as we partner with families. And then culture responsive care. We want to talk a minute about culture responsive care and how important it is. And culture responsive care is really about various components, including cultural awareness, so that there's an acknowledgement of diversity, that there's an acknowledgement of your own identity, our own identities, our own intersectionality, that there's cultural sensitivity, that we're recognizing the need to respect cultural differences. There's cultural humility. That's a process of self-reflection and critical thinking about our own identities and the identities with which we are helping, the people that we are helping. There's also an ongoing analysis of our own beliefs and our cultural identities, as I mentioned. Cultural safety, incredibly important. And that's going to be a topic of conversation in the other trainings as well, where we're really considering the social, political, and historical context of the family's lives. And we take those steps that are necessary to ensure safety, right? We know what's going on right now in our communities. And how do we help people stay safe is really important to the help that they receive, right? Determined, cultural safety is also determined from the person receiving services. So, for example, what I may deem as safe as a white woman, right? A white cisgender woman is going to probably be very different from somebody else who is not a white cisgender woman. And so to think about that, that person that I'm working with and their family, they're going to determine what safety means for them. And we're going to have conversation about that. And then culture responsive care is all of those things. And it requires us to be self-reflective, that we assess our own implicit and explicit biases, that we use anti-racist practices in care, cultural humility in care, trauma-informed principles in care, and then we have a commitment to learning about our own as well as other cultures. And Melanie really was talking to me about this. This is, I don't know, Melanie, if you want to talk about
Yes.
as you're schooling, but one of the takeaways that I think should be a mantra here for us as well is that we see all the intersections of who families are.
Yes.
We guard them all with equity.
And the fact is, some intersections present louder than others. like my presentation as a Black person, I can't, if you can see me, you can see the melanin, right? You know, but you don't know whether you don't, but there's other parts of me. You don't necessarily know my gender. You may think you know my gender expression. You may think you know my educational status. You may think you know a particular, but you don't know. And just because someone does not have language for some of these things does not mean that they're not prevalent. Right. And I would just want to say something about cultural safety because it came up at work last week. We were talking about something happened, right? And one of our coworkers was in mental health distress. And another person from another department went and handled it, and they had the person go home. And so when we find out, I was like, no, that was not the thing you do, right? We don't know if they're going to be safe, whatever, whatever. They said, well, we'll send the police to do a wellness check. And all the Black folks in the room, we lost our stuff. Like, you can't do that. And because they meant well, but what they did not understand is for many of us, the person they were sending is a large person and also very deeply hearing impaired. And we said, if this person is behaving erratically, they're not able to hear, and the police are knocking on their door and they're large, all we could think about, because we are the land of Daniel Prude, we thought that something bad could happen. But the person who suggested it meant all the good in the world. But we were like, no, you can't do that. And we had to have a whole conversation to explain why that did not feel safe for us, and how we, as in this case, as the people who are doing it, we get to define what is safe. And it opened up a whole conversation, a whole new understanding. So when we're looking at culturally responsive care, we really need to let the folks that are being served, that our partners, our parents, our caregivers, our young people guide us. And sometimes they guide us with what they say, and sometimes they guide us with what they don't say. And we need to watch it all and be mindful of it all.
Yeah. Thank you. So things to keep top of mind. That many
So,
people-
yes, we want you to keep these things, and we know you already do, but a lot of times you just need to put it out there, because how many of us know that we're busy and we have way more work than we could ever do in a week, right? Many people entering our services have had traumatic experiences before they ever got to us. And when they get to us, it is not their best day, right? And these experiences have led to severe distrust and apprehension around agencies and around systems. It is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to try and work through it, because this can become a barrier. And, we know that you didn't do it. So don't take it personal. It's not you as an individual, but it is up to you as a person who's sitting in the seat that day. It's not up to you to say that we're not all bad, I'm one of the good ones, none of that. It's up to you to meet that parent, that caregiver, that family where they are, and act like it's Missouri and show them what partnership looks like, show them what collaboration, show them what respecting them and seeing them in their full humanity looks like. And as time goes on, they'll see it and they'll meet you, because they want this to work. Irrespective of what's happened before, every time we go in, we as families, we want it to work. And so if you give us some, and don't be fragile and don't be defensive because you didn't do it. Don't only pick up those things that belong to you. We can do this.
Yeah, thank you. And then curiosity, right?
Yes, yes, and stay curious. But the thing is that, like I said, families are the ultimate knowers. And we want to stay curious, but we've got to make sure that curiosity and the answer to that curiosity only moves at the speed of trust. So, do you really need to know this thing that you're curious about right now? Or can you wait for this thing to come out naturally? Right? Because parents, I remember we were a very loud family when I was growing up, right? People were loud. And it sounded like you would come up to my house and it almost always sounded like people were fighting. And they weren't fighting, they were just loud all the time for no reason, right? I remember when I was younger, a social worker came to the house and wouldn't come in because they were afraid. My aunts and uncles were playing spades in the dining room. They said, "I'm about to hit you." And it was like they were about to hit him with a spade and cut and win the hand. But they're hearing all this yelling. And they wrote in their report that there was violence going on in our home. And everybody's like, "What do you mean? What was going on?" And no, she never crossed a barrier. Now, this was many, 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 many decades ago, right? But I use this example that culturally for us, we didn't see anything with this. This is the way it always has been. It's only through my age now and my training that I've learned that how other people may see this, right? And so, but we've got to be curious, but also that curiosity moves at the speed of trust. This is why sometimes people don't want you in their home. It's not because there's something bad in their home. They feel that you're just not going to understand. And because of the power dynamics, sometimes a lack of understanding on the part of a provider can cause a bad outcome on the part of a family. And so it's, we just have to make sure we keep, and be curious. Don't judge, ask the question, but remember that your getting of the answer will only move at the speed of trust.
It's great that you added that, Melanie, because when you're working with families, you can't be judgmental because on the other slide, the previous slide for the assessment, yes, a strengths-based approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something fun like that. And I'm a space player, so I know exactly what was going on in your house. I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I know how it
Right.
can be when it
But
comes
girl,
down to
they had
space.
the big joker on their forehead and they were like,
Yeah.
yes.
But I'm just saying you have to be culturally mindful of, the way people do things when they're in their own home. Your home is your home, right?
Yes.
And what goes on in your home, if you're not harming yourself or others, sometimes it can be detrimental with somebody else on the outside looking in. But that's
Yes.
to have a conversation instead of assumptions. A lot of people assume things when they're not supposed to. Ask the question instead of going behind like the family back or the family member going behind each other family member back, because something so minute and so small could turn into something big, like violence is
Absolutely.
actually going on in the home when it's not.
Right. And the thing is and when you use different language for things, right? I mean, I've seen this manifest in all kinds of ways. That's why I talk about it so much when I train, because I have watched it manifest, in ways like I remember a time when some young people were talking about, man, you need to dead that. You need to dead that, right? And man, dead that, right? And they were talking about squashing a beef. They were talking about trying to make peace. But one of the workers who heard it thought that they were going to someone's going to get shot. And it was like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "That's not what they said. Says, I don't care what word. Telling me I said." And we literally had to put the words up on a screen. I called in 3 young people, offered them gift cards. I lied, y'all not. Blindly walk in. I said, "Read what's on the screen and tell us what it means." "Oh, they about to squash some beef." "What does that mean?" "I need you to use old people language." "They're going to stop having conflict and try to get along." "Thank you." And they walked out and the people are standing there like, "But they said these words." I said, "It doesn't matter what the words are. Didn't you ever use words like, different words when you were a young person?" But the thing is, what we have to remember all the time is the power dynamic. Your interpretation guides your intervention. And if you're in a position of power, you must remain curious, because if you choose wrong, you get to go home, but that parent may lose their child. I'm just saying.
We have to think about the family, not just like you said, hearing and all the different words. I had my personal experience with that as well. Coming from a
Mhm.
quiet family, getting married into a very loud family, using all those words, not always pleasant. And I had to learn to find my place in that family to be heard as well. And I swore to myself that I never use swear words, and I have held to that more than
Mhm.
40 years now. So there is a way how you can communicate with everybody, but who is the highest position in the family? Who do you have to reach trust with and keep the trust? And it trickles down. So
Absolutely.
that is the part that we sometimes not accept, or we not used to it, depending on what our understanding is. And especially when you say, as a social worker or coming as a nurse assessor into a
Mhm.
family, it starts at the door when you enter. Are the shoes off or on?
Mhm. If you walking up to the door and you see 15 pairs of shoes at the door,
Right, that gives you a hint, and if you
it gives you
don't
a
get
clue.
that, then you absolutely don't, already you made a mistake right there, but you take your shoes off because that is your observation. And so on and so on as you are entering into this home, into this family. And that is, I think, the key. Never, ever assume, ever.
No, you
Yeah.
know, and it's amazing, and I know it's amazing how little things can go and go so far. I
Mhm.
was doing some work in San Antonio, Texas, and I walked in, and it was community work, and I walked into the room, and I I'm gonna say I peeped the vibe, right? And I looked, and I said, I know who these people are. And before I got ready to introduce myself, I said, permission from the elders to speak. And my two co-workers were looking at me like, what are you doing? And I just sat there. I said, permission from the elders to speak. The elders all looked around and they were like, permission granted, daughter." And I began to do my thing, right? And I just went on and I introduced myself and I did, I talked about why we were here and we went through the thing. At the end of the meeting, the women the women got up and hugged me and they were like, "How did you know?" I said, "I recognized it." Right. And so I had to tell my coworkers when we stepped outside, I said, "Let me help you tell you who these people are." And I explained the cultural thing of those folks and why it was. But what it did was it raised their trust level of us 10 points, 20 points. You know, I've seen where people like when I trained family peer advocates, I said, keep a pair of little ballet slippers in your purse. Do not wear them when you get to a house where people are not wearing shoes. When you open the door and you see the shoes in front of the person, you pull the things out of your purse, take off your shoes and slip those slippers on. And people said, oh my God, it makes they're tiny things, but
Yeah.
they say that you see me,
Yeah. You care.
that you care.
Yeah. And
But thank you everybody for you all are so great with,
I know.
engaging. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, beautiful. We just want to spend a minute here because we got to move on to talk about our family we're going to be working with over our time together. But think about a time where you were the recipient of a service and experienced good partnership. What did that look like? What made it a good partnership? If you just want to chat in or unmute. Do you have an example, Melanie?
Um, oh, I
Hi.
do. I have a great example. When my youngest daughter had the most severe challenges during her adolescence. And we were going and we had to go to the hospital. And it was, she was having a really hard time. And one of the nurses came in and said, "You look hot." Right. And my daughter just looked at her like in the midst of all this folk, trying to figure out if they want to restrain her, what they want to do. She just said, "You look hot." She said, would you like a cold towel?" My daughter looked at her like and she said, "Yeah, can I do that?" And immediately she gave her a cold towel and put it on the back of her neck.
Mm,
Because when my daughter gets highly anxious, she gets overheated.
mhm.
And the cool towel on the back of her neck brought her anxiety down. And then she came back and said, "Listen, we need you to do A, B, and C." And my daughter was compliant the rest of the time. And I just looked at the nurse and I was like, and she mouthed to me, "I'm a mom," right? It was like, and it was what I needed. We had been up for like 3 days at
Mm,
that point, and my daughter was able to get in. They were able to admit her, get her, and start her on, and that was her last hospitalization. Live to God's ear. She is now 24 and she has not been hospitalized since. And she said that, that was the best experience she had ever had when she was in challenge. And it was a cold wet towel because someone saw her other than what she called what she said. They saw me as not the crazy kid, just a kid.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share? We have some sharing happening in the chat. I was listened to and felt validated. They had a good understanding of the problem and they were willing to collaborate with me on the solution. Our background stories and how we can relate to these families has created partnership. Yes. I worked with preventive services for 4 months and the lady was super down to earth and they never judged me for why they were at my home. Providers being flexible to work around my child's school schedule, help reduce my child's stress as she would not be missing out on any classwork. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So just keep this in mind, right? When you experience good partnership, what does that look like? So let's move on to meet Randall and his mom. Okay. Randall and his mom, her name is Miss Simmons. Okay, Randall's an 11-year-old male who lives with his mom, Miss Simmons. For the past 6 years, Miss Simmons has been raising Randall on her own. Miss Simmons feels the pressure of being a single parent and often questions herself if she is a good mother. Randall's father was aggressive and abusive toward Randall and his mom. When Randall was 5 years old, he and his mother fled to get away from him. The relationship between Miss Simmons and Randall has been challenging, and she feels overwhelmed and does not know what she can do to help him. Randall has started to withdraw from his mother and spends much of his downtime sleeping or laying around. He used to love to play basketball, but recently has not wanted to go to the games or the practices. He often gets agitated and isolates himself in his room. Miss Simmons has tried so many different ways to support Randall, but nothing seems to work. She worries about his behavior and his future. Miss Simmons often wonders if she made the wrong choices and that this behavior change is her fault. As a single mom, she carries a lot of responsibility and she loves her son and only wants the best for him. Miss Simmons decided to reach out for help. So we're going to watch a video about Miss Simmons' experience in her first intake session, okay? And then we're going to talk about it. Here we go.
What is your child's full name?
Randall Joseph Simmons,
What is your child's date of birth and gender?
May 24th, 2014, male.
What was your birth experience like?
It was pretty smooth. Randall was a beautiful baby. Everyone thought so, but he'd cry a lot. I mean, a lot. I could calm him down, but his dad couldn't, and it would make him really angry. When Randall was a toddler, we'd laugh and sing, and his dad would get jealous. He'd often make fun of us, and then he'd be aggressive.
Miss Simmons? Miss Simmons, are you okay?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I just spaced out.
That's okay. Can we continue?
Sure.
I asked about your birth experience.
Right. He was born the day before his due date. It was pretty smooth.
Do you have concerns about Randall's eating or sleeping behaviors?
No. Wait, maybe. He does sleep a lot.
Does Randall have another parent that cares for him?
No, not right now. One night, it got bad. He had had a few drinks and really hurt both Randall and me. I took Randall and ran to my sister's. I remember Randall crying, afraid that it was his fault, and I tried to reassure him that it wasn't. It was really hard.
Miss Simmons?
Yes.
Miss Simmons, it sounds like there's a lot going on. How are you feeling?
Me? Oh, no one has ever asked me that before.
I'm sorry that no one has ever asked you this before. I can see that this may be difficult for you. We can take as much time as you need.
Thank you.
Can you tell me your concerns regarding Randall?
Well, we struggle. He doesn't want to be around me, and I barely want to be around him. He doesn't listen. He argues with me all the time. It's hard to talk to him. I end up yelling a lot, and I'm always fighting with him to get things done. Randall is now 11, and so much has happened in between, and he hasn't seen nor heard from his dad since he was 5. And I feel responsible for that. Randall is struggling.
Miss Simmons, do you want to take a break?
No, I can finish.
Okay, but let me tell you a few things first. You are not alone. I'm here to help you and Randall. We know that your involvement and participation in therapy is just as important as Randall's. And I want to hear how you are doing and how I can best support you and Randall.
I don't know. I guess I never think about what I need. We've been through a lot, Randall and me. We had a hard time with his dad. We left him and haven't talked to him since, so it's just the two of us. But I know Randall feels a lot of hurt, and I feel bad about it all. And as for how I'm doing, I'm just hanging in. It's a lot, and I don't have time to think about myself.
Wow, if I had kept going with the assessments, I wouldn't have known any of this. I will stay where she is right now and just listen to her share her story. I feel for her and Randall. I hear that you and Randall have been through a lot, and it seems that this has impacted you both in many ways. Could we plan on meeting once a week? Does that work for you?
Okay, we can do that. Thank you for listening to me. No one has ever asked me about my experiences.
I am really glad we got to meet today.
I just want to say that was great.
Sorry. Yeah. What'd you say?
I just want to say that was great. Such a great depiction of you, Melanie. When I saw the character, I'm like, is that you, Melanie? I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. I know. Fantastic, right? And pertinent to what we're talking about. So I'm just going to bring up our slides here because we're going to talk a little bit about Randall and Mom. Okay. So we're going to move to breakout rooms. We have, you're going to be in breakout rooms for about 9 minutes. Okay. Our team here are going to break everyone out, and we have a few things we want you to discuss in your room. We want to hear your thoughts about Randall, Miss Simmons. What did we learn about Miss Simmons? And what did we see that was important about Rachel's behavior? Rachel was played by Melanie Funchess. Rachel was the intake worker, the therapist. All right, so we ready, team, to go into breakout rooms?
Okay, we're ready.
Okay. So Felicia and Angelique are going to they're going to assign everyone a breakout room. So when you get a pop-up, please join your room. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. We're just going to let everybody come back. And then we just want to hear from you all. Share some of your thoughts around Randall and Miss Simmons. Share your thoughts around Rachel, the therapist. There were 15.
So what were your thoughts? Let us talk to us. What did you think? You can share in the chat or you can unmute and speak. Jasmine?
Hello. So I had a breakout group with Precious and Brianna.
Wonderful.
So I was able to talk about how Randall was currently struggling and that the mom didn't notice that she needed the time for herself. And also that the counselor had stopped based off like the script and allowed her to speak. Precious weighed in on her idea, and she basically said that she didn't realize that the mom didn't realize that she needed the time, which I thought was like a really good one as well. And Brianna as well, she had let us know that the mom was basically given a safe space to talk, and that she believed that it was impactful that she allowed her to have that time to speak and to be able to get a better understanding of the mother's struggle.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else wants to share from the breakout? Oh, we have Stephanie's chatting in. My group talked about how the counselor spoke to the mother and refocused on mom, her needs in order to support, in order to provide good support for Randall. Fantastic. Thank you, Stephanie. Anybody else want to unmute or chat in from your breakout room? What were your thoughts about Randall and Miss Simmons? What were your thoughts about Rachel? What did Rachel do for them? What did you learn?
What do you think about the interaction?
So we pop back in. Oh, am I breaking up? We pop back in while someone was speaking, so I don't know if some of this was already said. But we said that she offered a judgment-free zone. She gave the client space. So when we were hearing our thoughts, which we also like to hear the client's thoughts, she wasn't like pay attention or, saying like, what are you thinking? She kind of gave her that moment and that time. Let's say, she kept saying, I understand, validating her. And just reiterating the fact that it's okay to slow things down in a conversation, although we have an end goal to like let that client open up and speak, because it's really important to get to know them and understand their needs. And we also said that can be challenging sometimes because you can kind of get so off course, but also could be really important.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share? All right, I'm gonna keep us going because we're just about to run out of time. But chat in if you had any other thoughts about the video. Oh, we have.
Our group
Tyra
said
said
that.
at times. Oh, go ahead.
Who is
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, darling.
Our group was saying that maybe some therapy would be good for the both of them, because the abuse that they've endured. Also, and about how Randall feels, it would be he's sleeping a lot, so I'd say he's depressed. Maybe he's at the age where he's starting to understand all of it more, everything that happened, and how it worked out with his dad, and yeah, basically that.
Yeah, thank you.
And in the chat, Tyra says, at times the parent doesn't recognize that they have needs as well because they have been conditioned to just focus on the child. The interaction between the mom and Rachel helped the mom to recognize that it felt good to be listened to and it was okay for her to speak about her own experience.
Yeah. Thank you. Strong work, everyone. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, joining your breakout rooms. We're going to keep it going. In closing, there are many benefits of family partnership. You all have identified most of these, right?
Yes.
Including reducing.
Because this is a superstar group.
Right? Well, y'all are amazing. And I want to just talk about next steps. So we'd love for you to practice a little bit, right? So if you all can identify two caregivers that you're working with, that you can practice engagement with, consider their perspective and how to bring them into mental health services with their youth. So just take this time. The next training will be on October 3rd, which is Friday. Can you believe we're in October? So Friday, October 3rd will be the next training. And then training 3 will happen on October 6th. So by October 3rd, if you could just identify those caregivers and think about them that you're going to be practicing with, it would be amazing. If not two, just one. We just want to make sure that you're kind of bringing these thoughts, these practices to life in the work that you do. Okay. And then you are going to see our colleagues on October 3rd. But please, does anybody have any questions that they have? If so, you can unmute or put them in the chat. We want to hear from you. I've so enjoyed you. You all are amazing. This is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Question.
Please.
Yes.
I don't do direct services. So how am I supposed to engage with a parent or caregiver?
You now when I've done this and when I got to a place where I was no longer doing direct services, I would do engagement with a parent or a caregiver that I know. It doesn't have to be someone I'm serving. It could be because what I've done, like when I did this as a supervisor, I would engage with parents and caregivers that I knew to keep my skills sharp. Right. And then that way I could speak authentically to the folks I supervised. Right. And so you might say, if you have a relative, a cousin who has kids, said, can I try this with you? It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be someone you serve. You just want to practice the skill.
Okay, because that's the route I was gonna go anyway. I just only wanted clarity.
Yeah, no problem, girl. You
All right.
you were right on track.
Thank y'all.
Okay.
And Melanie, you're phenomenal. I saw you at the last conference in Albany, New York. Keep rocking. We need you.
Thank you, baby.
All right, take
I'm
care,
trying.
everybody. All right.
All right.
Here's our upcoming events. Our next two trainings, we have another event called Runaway and Homeless Youth in New York State, Services, Referrals, and Mental Health Intersections on October 8th. And then we have collaborative problem solving for concerning behaviors in youth on Thursday, October 23rd. So everyone, it's been such a pleasure. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Melanie, do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you so much for all that you do to help our parents and help our young people to live their best lives. I appreciate you and thank you so much.
Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.